In the world of televangelism, few stories are as complex and heartbreaking as that of Bishop Carlton Pearson. Once hailed as a rising star in Pentecostal circles, his life became a cautionary tale of faith, controversy, and the price of theological transformation. But behind the headlines and church scandals was a very human story, one involving a devoted wife, a crumbling marriage, and the devastating consequences of standing by your convictions when the whole world turns against you. Today, we're diving deep into the life of Bishop Carlton Pearson, the woman who stood by his side during his darkest hours, and the heartbreaking revelations about what really happened behind closed doors when everything fell apart. This is a story about love, loss, and the ultimate price of challenging religious orthodoxy. To understand the magnitude of Carlton Pearson's fall, you first have to understand just how high he had risen. Born in San Diego in 1953, Carlton Pearson was destined for greatness in the Pentecostal world. He was mentored by none other than Oral Roberts, the legendary televangelist who saw something special in the young preacher. By the 1980s, Carlton had established Higher Dimensions Evangelistic Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his ministry was exploding. At its peak, his church boasted over 6,000 members, and his Azusa conferences drew tens of thousands of believers from around the world. He wasn't just successful, he was beloved. Carlton Pearson was seen as the future of Black Pentecostalism, a bridge between traditional gospel and contemporary worship. But success in ministry often comes with personal sacrifices, and Carlton's rising star would soon cast long shadows over his personal life. In the midst of Carlton's meteoric rise, he met Gina Gauthier, a woman who would become not just his wife, but his anchor through the storms that were coming. Gina wasn't just a typical pastor's wife. She was educated, independent, and had her own career aspirations. When she married Carlton in 1993, she was stepping into a world of bright lights, packed auditoriums, and the intense scrutiny that comes with being married to a high-profile minister. For years, their marriage appeared to be the picture of success. They had 2 children together, Julian and Majesty, and Gina seemed to embrace her role as First Lady of Higher Dimensions. But behind the smiles and public appearances, Gina was watching her husband undergo a profound theological transformation that would ultimately tear their world apart. She later revealed that she began noticing changes in Carlton's preaching style and message as early as the late 1990s. He was asking harder questions, challenging traditional doctrine, and developing what would become known as his gospel of inclusion. The gospel of inclusion. 3 words that would completely reshape Carlton Pearson's life and ministry. In the early 2000s, Carlton began preaching that hell, as traditionally understood, didn't exist. He taught that all humanity was already saved through Christ's sacrifice, regardless of their religious beliefs or lifestyle choices. This wasn't just a minor theological adjustment, this was a complete overthrow of fundamental evangelical doctrine. Carlton later described the moment his theology shifted. He said it happened while watching news coverage of the Rwandan genocide. He couldn't reconcile the image of a loving God with the idea that those victims, many of whom had never heard the Christian gospel, were destined for eternal torment. For Carlton, this revelation was liberation. For his wife Gina, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Gina has spoken about how difficult it was to watch her husband become increasingly isolated from their religious community. The same colleagues who once celebrated Carlton as a rising star now whispered about his heretical teachings. She watched their church membership plummet from 6,000 to just a few hundred. She saw longtime friends and ministry partners turn their backs on their family. And she experienced the financial devastation that came when Carlton's television program was cancelled and speaking engagements disappeared. What many people don't realize is just how devastating Carlton's theological shift was for his family, especially for Gina. As a pastor's wife, Gina had built her entire identity around their ministry. Her social circle, her purpose, her financial security, everything was tied to Higher Dimensions and Carlton's success as a preacher. When the controversy erupted, Gina found herself in an impossible position. She could either support her husband's new teachings, which she wasn't entirely sure she believed, or oppose him and risk destroying their marriage. In later interviews, Gina revealed the emotional toll this period took on their relationship. She described feeling abandoned, not just by their religious community, but by Carlton himself, who became increasingly consumed with defending his new doctrine. The financial pressure was crushing. They went from living comfortably to struggling to keep their home. Gina had to return to work outside the ministry, something she hadn't done in years. But perhaps most heartbreaking was watching their children navigate this chaos. Julian and Majesty went from being the celebrated kids of a popular pastor to being associated with a man many considered a heretic. Gina later admitted that she sometimes wondered if Carlton's revelation was worth the destruction it caused to their family. By 2006, the strain had become too much. Carlton and Gina separated, and their divorce was finalized in 2009. But here's what makes their story so complex: even after their divorce, Gina never completely walked away from Carlton. In interviews following their split, Gina spoke with remarkable grace about their marriage. She acknowledged that Carlton was following what he believed to be God's calling, even if it meant sacrificing everything they had built together. She said, "Carlton didn't choose this path to hurt our family. He chose it because he believed it was truth. That doesn't make the pain any less real, but it makes it easier to forgive." This wasn't a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. This was a woman who had genuinely loved a man whose calling had taken him down a path she couldn't follow. After their divorce, Gina focused on rebuilding her life. She became a life coach and motivational speaker, helping others navigate major life transitions, drawing from her own painful experience of watching a marriage and ministry crumble. Meanwhile, Carlton continued his theological journey, eventually becoming a minister in the United Church of Christ, a denomination that embraced his inclusive message. In 2022, Carlton Pearson was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Despite their divorce years earlier, Gina stepped back into his life during his final months. She posted on social media, asking for prayers and preparing followers for Carlton's eventual passing. Her posts revealed a woman who had found peace with their complicated history. "He was my husband, the father of my children, and despite everything we went through, I still loved him," she wrote. When Carlton passed away in November 2023, Gina's tribute was both heartbreaking and beautiful. She celebrated his courage in following his convictions, even when it cost him everything. She wrote, "Carlton taught me that sometimes love means letting someone follow their truth, even when that truth leads them away from you. He was a man who chose his convictions over his comfort, and I respect that, even though it broke my heart." Today, Gina Gauthier continues her work as a life coach, helping others navigate the kind of devastating life changes she experienced firsthand. She speaks about the importance of finding your identity outside of your relationships and circumstances. Her message is one of resilience, forgiveness, and the possibility of rebuilding after everything falls apart. As for Carlton's legacy, it remains complicated. Some still view him as a heretic who abandoned biblical truth. Others see him as a prophet who had the courage to challenge religious orthodoxy. But perhaps the most powerful part of his story isn't his theology, it's the very human story of what happens when conviction collides with consequences, and the people who love us have to decide whether to follow us into the fire or watch from a distance. The story of Carlton Pearson and Gina Gauthier is ultimately about the price of transformation. Carlton paid for his theological revolution with his ministry, his reputation, and ultimately his marriage. Gina paid by watching the life she had built crumble around her, then finding the strength to rebuild from the ashes. Their story reminds us that behind every public figure is a family dealing with very private pain. It shows us that love doesn't always mean staying, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone follow their path, even when it leads them away from you. Carlton Pearson may be gone, but his story, and Gina's grace in telling it, continues to inspire people who are facing their own impossible choices between love and conviction, family and calling, comfort and truth. What do you think about this complex story? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines.